Formally, I'm kicking off this episode today. Hello and welcome to another episode of podcast series of South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, SARIM. Today, it's a great honor for me to have a very special guest from Nepal, Ms. Bridhika Senchury. Correct me if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're
all the
good.
way from Nepal. She's the co-founder of Dalit Lives Matter Global Alliance. And for the past decade or so, or for the past 10 years, she has been actively involved in advocacy for the rights of Dalits in Nepal, or perhaps wherever Dalits are, internationally and globally as well. And the best part that she does is believes, and she's very passionate about visual storytelling, which is a unique thing to do because we are living in the digital era, and that is something that we should uh, adopt these techniques. And she also brings about she believes in bringing about some positive stories about Dalits instead of those horror stories in a very passionate manner. So, without wasting your time, I would request you to tell us more about yourself, your recent activities, or you just came back from States. How was your uh, educational and academic journey went there? And how did you start about activism at a very young age? So over to you.
Thank you so much, Furqan, for such an amazing introduction about me. Yes, you rightly said, I'm just back from United States. I am in Nepal and I'm based in Nepal. My scholarship took me to United States. I was doing my master's in communication and development studies. So that is where my passion lies in visual storytelling and, using innovative approaches in this activism that I do. For since 2017, 18, I enrolled myself working in the issue, in the Dalit issue that belonging to a community itself, I was unaware about so many things. I say myself that I represent a very urban crowd. So I say myself, I come from a very, I'm a unprivileged caste, but I say myself, I come from a very privileged class. So, the experiences of Dalit communities are that my colleagues, that my friends and people that I know, it's very different from, the reality that I lived. So since 2018, when I started working, I started growing passion towards it, and I observed, the organization that I was involved in was using very traditional and very old school way of doing activism. So I was very much passionate about campaigns, doing digital advocacy. So that is how Dalit Lives Matter as a movement took place. It was in 2020 when Navraj Bika, I think you're aware about the massacre that happened in 2020, where six Dalit boys were, brutally murdered, and it was to do with caste. So that was kind of like we were very outrageous. We thought we should be doing something, and since it was COVID, our movement was very limited. So that is how we started Dalit Lives Matter movement. And I was like, and then around that same time, the George Floyd incident in US was also taking its shape. So US, the Navraj PK incident was also around 26th or 27th. So it was just a day apart. The movement was in South Asia, and especially in Nepal, and then the Black Lives Matter that was running globally was like very huge. So we thought this is good time because there was COVID. So we did digital advocacy. We did a lot of campaigns throughout that time, and we did a lot of petitions. So it grew as a movement, and then we thought when like-minded people, when we came together with the same passion, we thought that we should also register and go ahead with it. So yeah, now we are formally registered, and now we've been advocating and working through different spheres. And meanwhile, the opportunity came that took me to United States for my study, but I take that as a good opportunity. It was like a reboot for me to go pursue my education, see and observe how things are there. And now I'm here, so I look forward to working more, bringing all the experiences and learnings that I have back in Nepal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and especially how you basically uh, grew up during the time of COVID-19, and I also linked it with because when I started resumed my job, I also had a lot of challenges and bringing about positive stuff during COVID. And it was a new normal, and people learn a lot about how to. And it basically people have adopted these techniques these days. So I mean, since we are doing it right now, virtual stuff and physical stuff was different. So nowadays it's very very much in common in practice. And I really appreciate your struggle and really wish you all the best for in your future endeavors as well. So I mean, talking about the since you are in Nepal and since you've been working on the Dalits in Nepal as well. So Can you please provide us an overview of the caste system in Nepal? How prevalent is it in contemporary Nepalese societies, and what forms does it take?
So the caste system is pretty much similar to what we see in the South Asian context, like especially in the India, because there are like four caste groups, and the Brahmin, Kshatri, Vaishyas, and Sudras, and the caste that is outgroup, that is the Dalit community, which is also considered as the untouchable caste here in Nepal. So talking about particularly Dalit community, Dalit community constitutes of 13.4 percentage of the total population in Nepal. We are 29 million population, but however, scholars argue that the total population is about 20%, and how you identify Dalit community is by their title. So people tend to change the title just to avoid any discrimination, or because they are uncomfortable, and just to maintain that status quo in the society. So when we talk about the discrimination in the present day context, there are different kinds of discrimination in context in Nepal. One being the social discrimination. Still, it is very the caste. It seems like the issue of past, but the caste-based discrimination and the discrimination faced by Dalit is still very prevalent in the Nepalese context. And in many communities, Dalits are still subjected to practices of untouchability. We don't really see that in the urban setting, but there are invisible forms of discrimination that exist. But in the rural setting, I mean, verbally, people do mention that you belong to a Dalit caste and you are not invited, or you are not, you are restricted to certain kind of things, and restricted to temples, or social gatherings, or some people, they do not even invite Dalits to their houses. And in 2021 itself, 2021 report by the Ministry of Home Affairs, it was recorded 39 caste-based discrimination cases were recorded, and which was already 29, rise from 29 in the previous year. And if you just see the caste-based discrimination cases that was documented by some of the foundation in its media monitoring, there were 88 caste-based discrimination that was, let alone in 2022. I'm mentioning this this particular data because my research was revolving around the until 1946 to 2022. So so the recent data, I do not have it, but I'm sure it isn't very in line. So 2022 is just 2 years ago from now, and that we already had like 88 caste-based discrimination. So in terms of social discrimination, we still have the cases of discrimination that's emerging out, and I suppose these are just recorded cases, and the numbers could be even more. And in terms of economic exploitation, Dalits are still lack education and proper employment opportunities. So, they are restricted to menial jobs. And the poverty rate among Dalits is notably higher in Nepal. We just have 41% of Dalit stands at the national average. The poverty rate is 41%, and the national average is 25.16. So, it is almost double. So, the economic exploitation is quite high. And when we talk about the educational barriers, I told you, there is poverty, and because of poverty, not all Dalits get to have access to quality education or education at all. And the literacy rate among Dalits in Nepal is 65.9%, which is slightly lower than national average, which is 71.15%. So in terms of education, it seems progressing, but however, in quality education or in the higher education, this literacy rate is basically who can read and write. But when we talk about higher education, who are graduate, or taking a graduate degree, it could be very less, because I'm the first generation who actually graduated, took a degree. So, even though I was in a progressive family, I come from an urban setting, I'm the first generation who actually has a degree. So when we talk about the rural setting, the numbers must be really, really low. And when we talk about political marginalization, the constitution mandates proportionate representation. But sadly, the recent election has shown a very sad result, the 2022 election. In the National Assembly, where 8 seats are allocated for Dalits, only 7 were elected. And when we talk about House of Representatives, 39 seats are allocated for Dalit, but only 16 Dalits are elected. And when we talk about Provincial Assembly, 77 seats are allocated, but only 32. So we can see, even when the Constitution has mandated, there should be a proportionate representation of Dalits, the numbers are very disappointing. So imagine, if there was no proportionate representation, or the Constitution has not mandated any of such things, it could be, the numbers could be even lower or zero, right? So these are the forms of different discrimination, but however, there are also invisible forms of discrimination. People now don't say hey, you're a Dalit, don't come and sit with me, or, or just don't, a lot of things, or also like a digital bully, like, when people are advocating people like me. I mean, I personally have not encountered, but colleagues who have been working and advocating for it very vocally, they are targeted, by on the online platforms. So in terms of Nepal, specifically talking about Dalit communities, I think we are far from the reality right now.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, the numbers are very staggering in terms of the allocation of seats in national assemblies and provincial assemblies as well. So, in terms of the quota system, in terms of job allocation, how do you see? I mean, are their numbers like improving, or are they the numbers or the statistics are decreasing in terms of having a quota system in government sectors as well? You talked about the academic and the political part of it. So, in terms of quota system, do you have any numbers or statistics in terms of having an or allocation jobs being allocated to the Dalit communities?
Unfortunately, I do not have it as I speak of now. But when we talk about quota system, I mean, the debate currently is like, is the quota system really important? Is reservation really important? Why do we need Dalits? Because the constitution also mandates that, of course, there is proportional representation, but also it mandates that one Dalit woman in each ward offices of Nepal. So that shows quite a number, right? So in each ward offices, you have one Dalit woman as compulsorily. So that shows quite a big number. But when you talk about civil services, the numbers are disappointing. In leadership positions as well, the numbers are quite disappointing. I do not have like the actual data to present to you right now, but the debate around that the quota system should be there or not, it's I feel like it's that shouldn't be a discussion right now. It should be when we have like a very proper representation, that is when we can speak about, okay, the quota system is not required, or the reservation policy must be revised, or there could be different policies that could be introduced. But right now, the Dalit representation in leadership roles are very, very minimal. So I think we need a lot of work on that aspect.
Thank you so much for that. Another question that your research focuses on the Dalit community. What inspired you to delve into this? You've already touched upon the first part of it. What unique challenges and opportunities do Dalits have or face in Nepal today?
Coming to your first question, what inspired me? I mean, yes, as I mentioned to you, as I started working on it, the movement, as I progressed from the movement, and I realized, like, there needs to be a lot of studies that needs to be done. And this topic, the understanding anti-caste movement in Nepal, it was like my personal quest for understanding what's really happening in Nepal, because my motive was to always come back and work. So I thought, like, what's happening in the current movement, and what are the aspects that we can work on. So that really drove me to do this study. And coming to your second question, like the unique challenges, I think the challenges are we feel like the caste-based discrimination or the discrimination against Dalits are something that it does not exist, but still there is social stigma when we talk about Dalits. I mean, there are people who have done remarkable things, like you also mentioned in my introduction, that I'm done with always mentioning Dalit as poor or economically backward or someone with sorry stories, right? So there is a lot of social stigma attached to Dalit still, even in the given context. Of course, the majority represents that, but also at the same time, Dalits are progressing. There are like scholars, there are people who are doing really good in different spheres of life. So I think that needs to be also equally recognized. And also the other unique challenges could be lack of representation in leadership roles, like I mentioned to you in your previous question. And the third challenge is Nepal has been very progressive in terms of acts and policies. We have a constitution that mandates the rights of Dalits. We have two exclusive article of 14 and 24 that speaks about Dalits' rights and the untouchability, right? So, but however, when it comes to implementation of this constitution mandates and different acts that has been introduced, there still lacks a challenge of implementation. So I think that is one of the unique challenge. And I think the other would be access to quality education. There is education, like I mentioned to you, when we talk about literacy rate, it just seems like 5% less to the national average. But that literacy rate only talks about the person who can read and write. But when I talk about just the Dalit community who has actually had like a quality education, from a quality or a very good university, so the numbers are very minimal because the priority is different. So that's why the access to education is also minimal. So that is one of the challenge. And because there is lack of quality education or education opportunities, that leads to economic and the employment opportunities are also very restricted. And sometimes, it works in favoritism and the famous word nepotism. So, so yeah. yeah, employment opportunities are also very quite a challenge in when we talk about the unique challenges. But I think you also mentioned about what could be the opportunities, right? In your question, I think yeah, implementing this, we have been very progressive, Nepal, but implementing this acts and policies is a good opportunity to be even forward from where we are, because we have been very progressive in terms of laws and policies. But if we could really, implement these laws and policies, I think it is really good for Nepal. It could be also it could be an example to the South Asian context when we are working in the Dalit community. And I think since we are focusing on research, I think there needs quality research, and one of the opportunities is also to have more and more publication on the issue. And right now there is a lot. I'm not saying it's not. There are a lot of publications, but I think now it needs to be also digitally accessible, and it needs to be in the English, so that a lot of people from around the globe can understand and know about what's actually happening. So I think these are the opportunities I feel is relevant in present context in Nepal.
Brilliant. I mean, in terms of challenges and opportunities, I think there's a lot of similarity in terms of the South Asian context. So people who are living in South Asia who are in minority, which is again, I would say sort of discriminatory term. When we say minority, it should be basically, I had a chance of speaking with one of the religious minorities scholar. He said that we tend to hate the term of tolerance. We should be accepted. There should be acceptability rather than the terms of tolerance. So yeah, there are challenges, and there are similar sort of challenges that people face in our part of the world. So speaking of, since you are the digital storyteller, and I would like to capitalize that moment, can you please tell us what innovative techniques and approaches that you use in telling stories? I also had a privilege to work with a journalist from States as well. She was also emphasizing that we should come up with solution journalism. We or instead of bringing stories which has repetitive and negative stuff, we should be providing solution stuff. So do you also incorporate these stuffs when you sort of like prepare or compelling stories and stuff like these? Can you please talk about it? I know it's a bit of diverted question from the proposed question, but since you are passionate about in this, and I also have sort of shared the common practices with you, so please go ahead and explain about what innovative techniques that you use, or any softwares that inspiring people like you and other who would delve into this.
Okay. Right now we live in a very visual form of reality. Like, if it exists digitally or visually, it exists. And if it does not exist digitally, or if you do not have any visuals of it, it feels like, it does not exist. So going back to, how we started with Dalit Lives Matter, the initial concept was to educate and inform people, because there were like a lot of myths and negative connotations and a lot of confusions among people, when they wanted to know, and a lot of things were in the books, but not everyone wants to go through it, right? So we thought that this is a right way to enter into this, and we created 3 educational informative videos. One talks about why the term Dalit, because in context of Nepal there is still a debate, like changing the name would be end of the solution, but I mean that's not the solution. So why the term Dalit, and how come the Dalit term came into existence? So we made one informative video, and at the same time we thought that there was a need to make like why the Dalit movement still matters, why the movement still matters. So we made that second video, which talks about the history of the Dalit movement in Nepal, and what is it going, and why is it still why we are still advocating for Dalit rights, because clearly the constitution has given us so many things, right? So when an outsider thinks like, okay, why are you advocating so much on the issue when you have gotten everything? So we thought that that's relevant. And the third video we made was about the reservation policy. Why is it still important in the Nepalese context, because the debate was around the reservation policy should be there or not. So these are the educational information videos, one of the approaches that we use. Second was using social media to post about following up on the cases advocacies that was happening. So, social media in the current context is a very strong tool when we advocate for an issue. So that was one thing, and through which we shared a lot of myths, debunking myths about the Dalit communities. And, sometimes people do not know that they are discriminating Dalits. For example, we did one of the social media posts saying that what not to say to your Dalit friend, because, sometimes people say like, hey, our family is very progressive, but the servant that we have in house is a Dalit. So, it's kind of offensive, right? So, those kind of advocacy approaches we took through our social media. And third was having like this kind of a conversation with the leaders, educating and properly telling them about the caste-based discrimination. But not just this, we also in 2020 launched Paint the Revolution, so which is a concept of painting murals and arts in different in the walls of different places across Nepal. Currently, it's in fourth phase. So we managed to do a lot of murals that depicts, stories of resistance of Dalit communities, like I mentioned to you, and you also mentioned that we are done with sad stories of Dalits. Now the positive stories should come. So these are the approaches that we have been working, with the traditional approach. This is the way that we are directing. And right now, after coming back from States, my motive is to now bring more stories where, people from the community are speaking for themselves and, not people speaking on behalf. So I think that is the approach that I'm trying to take. My background is not journalism. It's mostly in the communication and development. So I think I'll be focusing more on video production and also podcasting or such interviews with the community people and not just the experts who are advocating. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that perfectly answers my question. And moving on the techniques and the methodology part of your research, could you elaborate on recent methodology you employed for your study? And what were some of the key findings that surprised or challenged your initial assumptions about caste system in Nepal?
Yes, the Understanding Anti-Caste Movement in Nepal, it was like purely qualitative study. I did in-depth interviews with 10 organizational heads who were working in Nepal and advocating for the issue. And I used convenient sampling method. It was challenging for me to grasp everyone who's working on the issue. But I just had people who had worked for over 10 years in the issue, and they were involved in the whole progression of the movement. So when I started, like I told you, it was a very personal motive of knowing what's really happening. Some of the things that I already knew. There were 8 themes that I found, the key findings. And from it, one was the major was the leadership vacuum. I mean, when we talk about leadership roles, I mean, of course, there are leadership challenges, but there is also leadership vacuum. Like when we talk about India context, people really look up to B.R. Ambedkar and, the works that he have done. But when we come to Nepal, I mean, we still lack like a proper leadership in terms of organizational or a movement that, people can look up to or follow up to. I mean, it's not necessary, but this is something that I discovered from my study. And there was an education challenge, which was very expected. And it was also, since I was doing research, under the education challenge there was lack of data-driven research, particularly in the community. And one thing that was very surprising for me in this study was delusion of achievement. We have civil society organization was very instrumental in bringing all the reforms in the Dalit community in context of Nepal. But however, right now the status is such that people are still stuck to that achievement, which was almost 10 years ago. And right now they are still stuck that, okay, we have brought this constitution mandates, we have brought this acts, all those of things. But I think it's the movement has just been stuck into that. So I think that was one of the unique findings that I got from my study. And then the other would be social dynamics, that is within the intra-Dalit dynamics, and the also negative connotation that is associated with Dalit, which poses a very significant threat to the overall Dalit movement in Nepal, and which has impacted in making the movement very fragmented in context of Nepal. There is intra-Dalit dynamics there. I'm sure you're aware about, within the Dalit communities also there are like a lot of hierarchies and castes that follows within the community itself.
Yeah, I mean, that was really intriguing, the way the research techniques and the methods that you applied. Quickly moving on to our second last question, because I guess the internet might, play its role in distraction. So in terms of how has the anti-caste movement evolved in Nepal, what role do you see for academics and researchers in supporting and amplifying the voices of Dalit activists that is totally linked to your domain?
My study was based from a specific time, 1946 until 2022, and I took 1946 because it was when the formal Dalit liberation movement began in Nepal, and which was with the formation of Vishwa Sarvajan Sangh in Nepal. So that was kind of like a start to the Dalit movement. And when we talk about the anti-caste movement in Nepal, it was in phases. The initial phase was people were more concerned about getting access or fighting fighting to enter common spaces like the well, or getting water from a well, or entering temple. So that is it started with such kind of revolutionary acts. But the movement actually found its voice when it was with establishment of Utpidit Dalit Jatiya Mukti Samaj, so which was advocating for Dalit rights, and which also included for reservations, land, and jobs, and also actively challenging untouchability in Nepal. And because Nepal was always ruled by monarchs, so during monarchy it was very difficult for people to come out because they could be prosecuted. So the movement happened in phases, but and also one of the significant aspects is during the restoration of democracy in 1990 that led to formation of numerous non-governmental organizations. So we can see the civil society organization, the non-profit organization, and the federations advocating for Dalit rights in Nepal, which was locally, nationally, and internationally played a very significant role. And especially Dalit civil society organization in Nepal have been, integral part of fighting the caste-based atrocities in Nepal. And it was very instrumental in raising the issues of achieving Dalit rights in the constitution, campaigning against the untouchability, and advocating for the Dalit rights and policies. So some of the remarkable achievements through this movement has to be the formation of the National Dalit Commission, which was established in 2002, and Nepal was also recognized as the untouchability free state in a free country in 2006. And also the government endorsed the Caste-based discrimination and untouchability, which is Crime and Punishment Act in 2011, and also the Constitution in 2015, the Article 24, right against untouchability and discrimination, and Article 40, the rights of Dalits, was introduced. And also in 2020, Dalit Empowerment Act was introduced in Madhya province. But however, there are 7 provinces and only 1 province has introduced this act. And I think, 6 other provinces are also in the process. And as I'm aware that the civil society organizations are advocating for, getting this act also replicated in other provinces of Nepal. So I think answering your second question, the opportunity for researchers, I also mentioned to you earlier, I think it's my Zoom because it's acting up lately, but I'm just going to repeat what I said last. The opportunity for the researchers, which was your second question. There has been a lot of publication and research, but when I was doing my research myself, one of the challenge was I had to heavily rely on scholars and researchers who are not based in Nepal. So, I had to heavily rely on the materials which was available in India or other parts of South Asian countries, right? So, it is a good opportunity for researchers to have more of scholarly, papers to be published, so that, more and more citations and more and more research are accessible to researchers like who are doing in a very educational setting or taking it forward in a very professional way. So I think publishing and writing more on the Dalit issue is important, but at the same time, I think it's also important to write on the progress that the Dalit communities have made over the years. So I think this is the opportunity for a researcher to rightly intervene at the moment.
Okay, that's totally understandable, and it's really positive to hear the stories and some of the moments that has recently evolved. You talk about the period that you've mentioned in your research was there, and you've also hinted about some of the progresses that have been made during this period. So there is a element of optimism in terms of what's happening right now in terms of their movements or endeavors that are being taking place. We talk about the lack of research, the paucity of research that is still there. I mean, it's genuinely similar issues that are being faced in our part of the world as well. So I totally understand that part. So moving on to our last question, you have already preluded about the policy changes that you believe are necessary to address in terms of caste-based discrimination in Nepal, and how can these policies be effectively implemented to bring about tangible change?
In terms of policy change, I think enforcement of existing laws, which is again like strengthening the legal framework which already exists. So I think it's really important. The anti-discriminatory laws established should be properly, executed and be practiced well. And I think another is comprehensive anti-discriminatory law. I mean, introducing a comprehensive anti-discriminatory law that covers all aspects of caste-based discrimination in terms of not just the social spheres, but also in the employment, education, healthcare, and social services. And also that talks about intersecting challenges, right? So I think that's really important. And I think the third could be stronger penalties, because right now, when I have personally encountered many challenges, and I've seen people when they want to register the caste-based discrimination cases, they are not taken seriously. Even though it's mandated by the law, the people who are in power, the people who exercise this leadership roles, they come from the upper caste. So the issue of the Dalit communities are easily overshadowed. So I think taking this caste-based discrimination seriously is one, but at the same time, having strong penalties would really encourage people to not practice this caste-based discrimination and untouchability, which still exists in the present context of Nepal. Other could be. Right now, we have reservation policies and, in different spheres of the government. But I think, right now, what I've noticed the trend is like the token representation, just to make the panel look vibrant and say that we are very inclusive, just having a face Dalit or a face from the LGBTQI community or a woman. So, rather than having that, I think having like a strict mandate about having employers who represent the certain community, and the quality representation is what I'm talking about, and not just the token representation, is I think one aspect that can be worked on. I am not an expert in policies. I am somebody who's still learning and still, exploring different avenues and spheres of the different forms of, advocacy that takes shapes. But I think having what we have should be implemented well. And I think the implementation strategy, what you asked, is I think one needs to have community engagement. There are laws, yes, but it needs to also have proper community engagement from the grassroots level, because those are the peoples who are like in the extreme marginalization. And the second would be collaboration and partnerships. I think this is also an excellent way of speaking on what's happening in Nepal. And I think such collaboration with the other organizations, and not just organization, but very private sectors, so coming together to address the issue is really important. And I think lastly would be legal aid and support, is because that is something that's the strong factor that binds the harmony in the society, is what I feel. So I think for now, these are the some recommendations that I have. But like I said, I'm no expert in this field, so excuse me if something that's beyond the expectation that I mentioned, or something that you're expecting as my answer. But yeah, I think that is all I have to say for now.
No, the things that you said, or the terms or the future policies that you mentioned are pretty much the need of the hour these days, because when you talk about collaboration or having consortium on a common terms, there could be a possibility of having alliances between interreligious or intercaste-based communities within Nepal, or maybe within the context of South Asia as well. So yeah, I totally agree with what you just indicated, and you've been so great throughout this conversation. I mean, I've learned a lot from you, from your perspective, and it was really refreshing having you. Once again, thank you so much. Just an overview of what we had discussed today, those who joined us late. So you gave us the overview of caste-based system in Nepal and about the contemporary challenges as well. You talk about the research focuses on Dalit communities. You have brilliantly elaborated about the research methodology that you employed in your research. You have given us some of the optimistic, news on the basis of anti-caste movement in Nepal, in terms of future policies or challenges or necessary things that needs to be addressed. You have touched upon those points quite sufficiently. So thank you so much, Bridhika ji, for being with us today. So on this note, I am wrapping up this session. Thank you all for a wonderful time.